Resources Institute, and it is my honor to serve as your moderator. His Excellency, Manuel Pulgar
Bulavinaka, and a very good morning to you all. As all of you know in this room, the world's forests play a critical role in providing a stable climate and regulating global hydrological cycles. When damaged or degraded, they release this carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, therefore increasing global emissions. Forests contain some of the world's most important diversity and ecosystems, provide livelihoods for local communities and the world's poorest people, and support local and indigenous communities and cultures. In Fiji, 54.7%, or about 1 million hectares of Fiji, is forested. Of this, 89.4%, or roughly 894,000 hectares, is classified as primary forest, the most biodiverse form of forest. The avoidance of deforestation and degradation delivers significant benefits to both communities and the environment, and has become a key way in which many countries will meet their obligations under the Paris Agreement, as identified in many NDCs. Forests in this context include not only land-based forest systems, but also the wider mangroves and seagrasses and reef systems that are critical to island nations such as Fiji and many other island nations, both in the Pacific, the Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean. However, with global deforestation continuing to occur at a rapid rate, there's a real sense of urgency, as the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action makes clear. This urgency is to not only accelerate climate action, but an urgency to seek out innovative, nature-based solutions and implement transformative and sustainable initiatives. An urgency to pull everyone together to join this massive effort, and the urgency to put in place enabling mechanisms and innovative financing to make it all possible. Through its presidency of COP23, Fiji has been building a grand coalition committed to taking action and communicating this sense of urgency widely to all levels of government, to investors and financing institutions, to the private sector, to civil society organizations, and of course, to local communities. Fiji stands with the Alliance of Small Island States, Aiyaz, and all vulnerable nations in firmly focusing on the target of limiting global warming to within 1.5 degrees Celsius above that of the pre-industrial age, as the world agreed in Paris 2 years ago. Fiji fully recognizes that to achieve this, the world must reach net zero emissions in the next few decades and not wait for the latter half of the century. For small island states like ours and for all vulnerable nations, this is an imperative, as this is a matter of survival. In this regard, without urgent and accelerated action to protect forests and mangroves, we will fail in our efforts because, one, we know that 1.5 degree world is simply not possible without tackling deforestation and forest degradation and the associated emissions. Two, forests are a large part of our current problem. That is, in terms of continuing emissions from deforestation, but an even larger part of the solution in terms of ending those emissions and enhancing the safe and natural carbon capture storage function of standing and regrowing forests. And three, without promoting healthy forests, we also know that our nations won't be resilient to the impacts of extreme weather events without these natural buffers and barriers that protect us and contribute to healthy, sustainable livelihoods. Critical to all these efforts is the need for innovative finance mechanisms to protect all kinds of forests, again including land-based forests, mangroves, and seagrasses. While negotiations on forests have been amongst the most constructive strands of negotiations for the past 10 years, producing a detailed rule book on REDD+, the fact remains that the rules provide no actual formal mechanism within REDD+ for financing needs. To be blunt, REDD+ has struggled because of the lack of carbon market, has left it dependent on voluntary action and without the certainty needed to attract private financing. Additionally, the mechanisms being pursued by Norway and the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility are still being developed to a point where finance will actually flow into actual forests. While many governments have implemented measures to protect forests through establishing protected areas, this is not sufficient to avoid their destruction. Furthermore, despite the natural value of forests, they do not offer a financial return on investing in the conservation, protection, and management that can compete with the more destructive uses. There are no well-established markets of for forest carbon, or the broader benefits they provide, despite being critical to our very survival. Forests have therefore been unable to attract private sector finance at any scale. The hard, cold reality is that, ladies and gentlemen, that protecting forests at any scale requires capital and significant expenditure like any green infrastructure project. Between 2006 and 2014, a total of US $9.8 billion was invested into forests, almost 90% of which came from the public sector. However, it is estimated that somewhere between US $17 to $33 billion is required per year to halve deforestation by 2030. Given the limits on public climate finance, substantial financial support must come from vastly large pools of capital available only from the private sector. Going forward, we are hopeful that, firstly, the rules being negotiated for the implementation of the Paris Agreement smooth the way for further international cooperation on REDD+, and in particular, the innovative financing approaches under Article 6. Two, that all countries, but especially forest countries, enhance the profile of forests in the NDCs commensurate with their mitigation potential and potential to contribute to other SDGs. Three, mechanisms such as the GCF's results-based payments for REDD+ are effective. And last but not least, developed countries and the private sector increase financing flows for forests, especially the promise of results-based REDD+ payments, commensurate with their mitigation potential. This includes working together to provide mechanisms that drive and attract investment, both public and private, into REDD+, in a way that values these forests for their nature-based solutions to climate change and assisting to adapt to climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Fiji looks forward to receiving a report from this session, which will contribute to our discussions and negotiations over the coming week, and we ask you, in particular, to give real thought to the needs of small island states in protecting our forests and blue carbon ecosystems. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Well, that was an awesome presidency at COP23, and also a government that has His Excellency Manuel Pulgar, and so has been a leader in civil society at that environment for Peru, and in that capacity served as president of about those challenges and that progress, and recalibrate our own mental maps about where we are and where we need. That allows us to detect with increasing precision. And this is part of the COP23 Marrakesh